So switching gears, let's talk about those silly gooses over in the Pac-12. And they are silly. They're so silly. Because while the Big Ten was the big story, bad pun, bad entendre there, the bigger, more interesting story to me, the Big Ten was the bigger story. The more interesting story to me is what has happened in the Pac-12 over the last 24 hours. And if you haven't been paying attention, it's because the Pac-12 has basically just stood in the shadows for the last month and a half, doing nothing, saying nothing, no one protesting, no one rallying. There's no parents protesting in the streets. And a lot of you have asked me why. A lot of you have asked me over the last 4 or 5 weeks, dude, we see these parents protesting in the Big Ten at Michigan and in Nebraska and at Iowa and Ohio State. We see the players very vocal on social media. Aaron, why is no one going? You live in Pac-12 country, and for people who do not know, I am based in Southern California. I'm from the East Coast originally. I've been in California about 8 years. But people ask me, why is no one fighting for the Pac-12? And the reason, honestly, is very simple. It's because, as I've told you on this podcast, it wasn't the Pac-12 that didn't want to play. It was the government officials that wouldn't allow them to play. And the story that I've told, and the story that I think I've really been the only one in the media and the national media talking about, is even if the Pac-12 wanted to play, it would be literally impossible. Because as of Wednesday morning, gyms in California were closed. And because gyms in California were closed, it did not allow Pac-12 football teams in the state of California, also in the state of Oregon. They have their own laws, but it's the same concept. They weren't even allowed in their facilities to practice or to work out. And so when you ask me, why isn't anyone fighting for the Big Ten or for the Pac-12? It's because it's not as simple as just going to your school president and saying, let us play. It's going to the school president who then has to go to the governor and say, let us play. And it's funny because I talked about this on the podcast maybe 3 weeks or so ago, where I kind of just said, I'm kind of surprised that no one in Pac-12 country has taken this up as a fight in the political realm, not because I think that they're going to win some crazy, political war, but because it's such an easy topic, right? Everybody wants to play football. There's nothing more American than football, than high school football, than small school college football, junior college football. And so finally, we got some of that pipe up on Tuesday night, and it came from the Pac-12. And after months of silence, after nobody said anything, let's give credit to the USC football players. And listen, I know the Pac-12 gets a bad rap, and I think most of it's justifiable, and I think you'll understand even why more so in a minute. But those kids are still working hard in the Pac-12 in the offseason. They're still in the weight room just like they are at Alabama and Georgia and Tennessee and Florida and Kentucky. Those guys work hard. The coaches work hard. And so it has been disappointing, but it has been out of their control. And so I give so much credit to the players at USC because they finally spoke up on Tuesday night. And by the way, what was interesting was they didn't ask the conference commissioner, they didn't ask their school president to reconsider their decision because there was no decision to make. What the USC football players did was they went straight to the governor of California, Gavin Newsom, and said, bro, we're begging you, loosen up your rules so we can get in the facility, so we can practice, so we can play. USC football players said that. Then their offensive coordinator, Graham Harrell, the hotshot assistant coach, he came out and basically said the same. He's like, dude, my guys can't get in the facility. He's like, we're watching our opponents play all over the country. We have lifted weights in a tent outside. You can find the tweet. This is true. I'm not making this up. It's not AT exaggerating to be dramatic and controversial. USC literally has taken the weights outside and lifted weights outside because they cannot get into their facility. And so finally the USC players spoke up. And then finally, when the Pac-12 or when the Big Ten made their decision, the Pac-12 commissioner kind of came out and said, yeah, you know what? Maybe I should do something. And so at the time, I gave him credit because pretty early Wednesday morning, after it became clear that the Big Ten was coming back, Pac-12 Commissioner Larry Scott basically came out and said, yeah, I can't wait to work with local officials in California and Oregon to get our teams back in the facility so we can start thinking about football too. Washington State, Arizona, Utah, Colorado, not as much of a big deal. It's Oregon and California, where half of the Pac-12 is 2 schools in Oregon, 4 schools in California. So that was kind of interesting, right? It's like, oh, cool, good for the commissioner. Good for the commissioner. He has finally decided I am going to press the local government to get this thing going. And then you know what happened? This was great. The governor of California, Gavin Newsom, came out and said, well, wait a second now. We never told you guys couldn't play football. And if you read the fine print, it's pretty clear that Gavin Newsom actually knows nothing about football. He's like, yeah, it's just there were limitations of up to 12 people that were allowed to participate in any group activity. So pretty hard to play 11-on-11 tackle football when you can only get 12 people in one place at one time. And so Gavin Newsom comes out and said, wait a second now. We never said you couldn't play football. Now, your boy AT came over the top rope on social media, and I said very simply, no. He never said you couldn't play college football. He said you can't get in the facility to train to play college football. And so it was it was like a Seinfeld episode. It got even crazier. But essentially, the governor comes out and is like, well, we never said you couldn't play football. What you did say, though, Governor, is that we can't get in the facility to train to play football. And so then, listen to this. This is the crazy part. This is why I say it's a bigger story. Because like an hour later, about 5 o'clock Eastern, both the governors of California and the governors of Oregon completely loosened their restrictions, allowing players to get in the facility to train and get ready for a season. So that feels kind of crazy, right? And it is kind of crazy. But here is why it is actually crazy. It's because it's very apparent, if you read the fine print, that no one from the Pac-12 had ever bothered to ask the governor. So the Pac-12, for people who are not following what I'm saying, the Pac-12 essentially has been in a holding pattern. They canceled the season the same day as the Big Ten. That's in early August and whatever. And they watch the chaos in the Midwest, and they watch Ohio State and Michigan and all these protests. And the players are sitting back saying, well, there's nothing we can do because the governor won't allow us. And so the Pac-12 is just like, dude, we got our hands up. There's nothing we could do. We can't do anything. We're just waiting for government sign-off. And the government comes out and says, well, crap. The reason we never signed off is because you never asked us. And so the second the Pac-12 actually called the governor on the phone and said, can we get a little help here so we can play college football? The governor was like, yeah. Dude, no problem. I wish you had asked a month ago. And so it was a surreal. You know what it reminded me of? It really did remind me of an episode of Seinfeld. Remember the episode of Seinfeld where George and if you have kids in the car, put earmuffs on them. I'll give you a second. Grab those earmuffs, pull them apart, get them out of the closet, earmuff, and I'll count us down to 3, and then I'm going to tell the story. But 1, 2, 3, earmuffs. Remember the episode of Seinfeld when George sleeps with the cleaning lady at the office? And his boss is like, George, did you slept with the cleaning lady in the office on your desk? Like, what are you doing? And he's like, me? Cleaning lady? You sure? You sure you got the right guy? And the boss is like, yeah, it was you. And George is like, well, who asked you? Well, who told you? And the boss is like, well, the cleaning lady told me. And George goes, oh, was that wrong of me to do? Was that wrong of me to sleep with the cleaning lady in the office? And that's exactly what the Pac-12 did. Pac-12 for 6 weeks was like, we can't play. Government won't allow us. And then the government, they actually called the government. They never thought until Wednesday when the Big Ten came back to even call government officials to try and figure out if they could play. Finally, the government officials were like, dude, yeah, all you had to do was ask. And there's Larry Scott, commissioner, Pac-12, saying, oh, was that wrong that I didn't ask you if it was okay to play? And so I'll tell you this. Let me wrap on the Pac-12. Because what I would say very simply with the Pac-12 is this. Is that I am not, and I think you guys have followed me long enough, you know me. I'm not Mr. like everybody's got to be fired, right? Like some media, a coach loses 2 games in a row, oh, he's got to be fired, oh, he's terrible. Oh, that quarterback threw three interceptions, he's got to be benched. That's not who I am. If anything, I give most of these guys the complete benefit of the doubt. But for years now, we've been hearing how incompetent Larry Scott is, the commissioner of the Pac-12. We have seen Pac-12 football fall completely behind the rest of the conference. We have seen the Pac-12 not win a single college football playoff game since the first game in the history of the college football playoff, which was Oregon against Florida State in 2014. That was the only time a Pac-12 team ever won a college football playoff game. And since then, they have not only not won a game, they haven't even made the playoff in the last 3 years. And so I bring all this up to just very simply say, like the Pac-12 has fallen behind on the field. Off the field, they're a laughingstock. They don't make as much money as they thought. Their TV network essentially went under during this pandemic. They basically fired everybody at the TV network. The commissioner is the highest paid commissioner. He makes more than Greg Sankey. Excuse me, I had a cough there. He makes more than Greg Sankey. And, I'm not Mr. Fire everybody, but everyone in Pac-12 country is like, this guy's got to go. And I'll be honest, we have Arizona fans that listen to this show. We have UCLA fans, USC fans that listen to this show. I'm sorry, guys, because y'all been telling me how incompetent this guy has been for years now. And I was like, I'm sure he's not good, but I bet he's not that bad. Oh, he's terrible. He never thought to call the government officials so that his teams could practice. So shout out to the Pac-12. They're finally going to get back on the field because the commissioner finally thought, you know what? Maybe I should call the governors. Maybe I should see if it's possible for our leagues to get. If they had just called 5 weeks ago, the teams could have gotten in the facilities. It is unbelievable. It is incompetence at the highest level, and I cannot describe to you how embarrassing it is for someone that lives in Pac-12 country. I know these coaches. I know these parents of players. I know how hard they work. And it's just embarrassing that the leadership is so terrible. So I don't know what's going to happen with Larry Scott, but he is embarrassing. He is awful, and he has got to go. In terms of actual Pac-12 stuff, I'm telling you this, is that it's about, 9 o'clock Eastern on Wednesday. And I will tell you that there is already reports that the Pac-12 could potentially play as early as the same time as potentially, I guess you would say, the Big Ten. I'm still not sold. I believe there's not as many teams that are actually on campus as there are in the Big Ten. I think some teams still have to come back. Many of them have not gotten in the weight facility. So in theory, we could have Pac-12 football as early as late October. I have a feeling they're going to go at it alone late in the season, late in the fall. I hope I'm wrong. I hope we get all 5 power conferences back at the same time.